Well, welcome everyone. I am Dr. Basil Considine, and I am here today with a special guest from the EDD program to talk about the declaration of research problem assignments in the EDD program. I'm here from the Online Writing Center. I'm joining geographically from Arlington, Virginia today. And Dr. Catherine Yeager, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're joining us from?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I am Kathy Yeager. I am an assistant professor and associate program director for the EDD program, and I call Bryan, Texas home.
Very good. So along the course of doing a doctorate, there's, of course, the classes you take, and then the dissertation that you write at the end. And in my case, I started out with the dissertation that I thought was going to be about Italian music, and I ended up doing it on French music on the opposite side of the world.
Well, my dissertation was a phenomenological study. I can't remember the title of it, right? But it was a phenomenological study on how young leaders come to see themselves as leaders. And I studied 18 to 20-year-olds who'd had leadership experience in high school. And there's a line of research that says that before you become a leader, you first have to see yourself as a leader. And so that was my context was high school students, the 18 to 20-year-olds, the leadership in high school, and that identity development, and the connection to leadership. So it was but I went full circle and very much an iterative process and learning discovery about the topic as well as myself in the process.
Very good. So we have here today a couple examples that you've agreed to discuss with me of declaration of research problem text. And could you tell us, for the benefit of new students in the program, where this comes in the sequence of coursework?
Absolutely. The declaration of problem comes at the end of your third class in the program. The first class is your Lead 714, which is self-discovery. The second class is Lead 711, which is about leadership theory. And then that third class, Lead 701, is when you get into learning the dissertation process. And that's where the process of learning what's going to be required of you over the course of the next 2 to 3 years plus is really going to start taking shape. Dr. Maxwell, our program director, talks about running 2 races. You're going to be sprinting with the 7-week courses that you're going to be taking over the course of your time with us. And then we're also asking you to run a marathon on top of that. So then that marathon is called the dissertation process. And this 701 is the first time that you're going to be learning how to do annotated bibliographies. You're going to be learning and you're going to be starting to dig into the literature around the areas that interest you. And then at the end of that first class, you're going to be asked to do this declaration of research problem, which is a short just synopsis of where you think your research is going to go. In 701, you're going to be thinking about or starting to dig into the literature around your subject area. And this declaration of problem is your first attempt, one of many, because this is very much an iterative process, but it's like that 30,000-foot level of where you see your dissertation research going. It's one of those things that it can change because you haven't been in that literature that much, that students are just getting familiar with their concentration, things problems that they may be seeing in their context that they want to investigate.
I like that you emphasize that this is an iterative process that does change. I recall with my original dissertation topic, it involved doing research at a Vatican library in Rome in the Vatican Secret Archives, which sounds like a Dan Brown novel book because one actually does start there. That's Angels and Demons.
Mm-hmm.
But it just means that that's where they keep the personal papers of the popes. And I was all set. I prepared for 2 years to work on this. And then they announced a 3-year renovation plan that would involve closing the research room. And, this is the Vatican, they answer to God. And so a lot of researchers had to restructure things. And so, as you said, things change, things evolve. You learn things. Sometimes you get access to things you weren't expecting, and sometimes you don't, and you adapt. And you learn things in the literature that you didn't know when you started this.
Exactly. And that's why we want students, even though their things may change, we want them to start thinking early on about what the research direction is. Because remember that marathon that I was talking about? Mm-hmm. Part of that is collecting 25 annotated bibliographies. So you can see if you have an idea of that declaration of problem early on, you can use those 25 annotated bibliographies to poke and prod into the research and further develop this idea that you've developed. Now, if you get 10 or 15 annotated bibliographies into your pursuit or your direction and decide, this isn't something that I'm passionate about, this is something that's not, it's just not doing it for me, something's missing. It's easier to start over there than it is to get all 25. And then when you get to 765, which is the problem course where you're going to dedicate to the problem, it's going to be easier to start over midstream than it will be to get to the end and say, okay, I've got to start over completely in my literature review. And I've seen students do that. So it's not uncommon, but if that happens, you have to dig into the perseverance and to the resilience and to say, okay, this isn't working for me, but you can shift and move forward with something that works.
Now, before we look at one of these examples, could I ask you to say a little bit about proposals for research that you'd say might be a little bit more ambitious than is reasonable for 3 years?
Exactly. As you are working to define a problem, you want it to be focused enough so that you can complete your degree. It's size of the dissertation doesn't mean that it's not good work, that it's not it's not meaningful, that you can't make a contribution both to practice and to scholarship. But narrowing the focus helps you contain your research digs, if you will, or the topics that you're looking at. And because the best dissertation is the completed dissertation, right? So you want to keep the parameters so that it's something that's manageable, that you can feasibly get to a population for that you're going to research. So longitudinal studies, not something you can complete, overnight. Protected populations will increase the length of time that you want to, and you'll learn more about those types of populations and everything when you get into your IRB applications and certifications and that kind of thing. But you want to make it so that it's manageable, and so that you can, it doesn't get that dissertation creep, that you keep pulling constructs in and everything. It's something that you want it, because it's an applied dissertation. It's something, it's a problem that you're looking for, a problem that can be solved, that can be addressed with some type of interventions, improving some kind of process, improving some kind of something with training, or something with something that's going to make life better for someone somewhere in an organization.
One of my mentors was the late Philip Gossett, who was a Rossini scholar and editor of the Complete Rossini edition. And he gave me this advice: you will have the whole rest of your life to do whatever research you want, but most of the things you want to do will be easier when your dissertation is done and you're not being charged tuition. So I took that to heart in not taking too long to graduate. And certainly with many of our students who have other professional life obligations, finishing this one has many benefits just from being done.
Absolutely. And the program is designed to provide students with the skills, knowledge, skills, and abilities that they're going to need later after they get the degree, because this is just the starting point for them. They'll know how to do a research study. They'll know how to take what they've learned and go to the literature and make things better down the road. So this is just a starting point.
So I have here on the screen a text here using the Declaration of Research Problem template. And we see that there are a number of prompts here. And I have students who come to me in the online writing center to ask for input on refining these things. And there's some problems that we see more often than not. I wanted to ask your advice on this one. So I'm just going to read that first piece of text here. So we're responding to: describe the problem in your context or setting and the specific tensions or conflicting issues creating the problem. And the text here reads: the general problem is that many teachers in my local school district leave the profession after 2 to 3 years on the job. They leave because of burnout and low wages. Morale is low. New teachers are particularly vulnerable to attrition because they're not adequately prepared for the rigors of teaching. Now, I look at this and I say, well, it certainly sounds like there is a problem here. I'm not sure that they are writing to what the prompt is asking exactly. Tell me if you agree or disagree about this. When they say the general problem here, but it's followed by something in their district, it makes me think that maybe they're confusing the general and specific problem. General problem being the larger thing, often a society or system level thing, versus the hyper-local subset of that they are proposing to address. Because when I see new teachers are particularly vulnerable to attrition, that looks like a big picture thing. And would you agree or disagree?
Well, this is definitely something that seems to be written from an observation of the writer, the author. It's something that they're in describing the context, and it's obvious that this particular person possibly had exposure to different types of some literature, because the idea of burnout is definitely something that comes from a line of research. So it's something that from a general perspective, there are multiple things that are coming into play in this paragraph. But what is it that is specifically going, it's not asking for specific what's going on, but what is exactly happening in the context, if that makes sense.
There's some room for a little more specificity on what's happening here.
Right.
And I should hasten to point out for anyone watching this that refining this is, as Dr. Yeager said, a normal process of conversation. And it's hugely helpful to tell other people what you are proposing to do, the problem that's interested in, because the more you talk it out, the more you work out those things of, oh, this is the part that I'm really interested in, versus this is something related that is certainly happening, but not necessarily the particular thing that you are focusing on, because there are lots of problems in education and other fields, and it'll take many people to solve them all.
Right. So the big thing is probably probably teacher attrition. At this point in the process, we don't know that it's burnout. You don't know that it's morale. You just know they're leaving. Right. And so it's, the process of discovery would be getting to the bottom and interviewing and that kind of thing to see exactly what's happening within that context. Yeah.
We also sometimes have questions that come up versus finding something where the issue is a gap in knowledge versus a practice gap, where the solution is known, but it's not being done for whatever reason, which may or may not be a known. Sometimes it is as simple as, well, we don't have the budget for that. And sometimes it's more complex or requires more teasing out.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the second part here. So,
well, and just another point on that, low wages is not something that EDD students are going to be able to fix within their context. It may be one of the things that contributes to teachers leaving, but from a specific, I can fix the low wages, that's going to be beyond the scope of what's going on. It may come out as an outcome, if you're just looking at, okay, why are these teachers leaving? Low wages may be one of those things, and it may be a recommendation that you can make, but it's not going to be something that can be directly fixed from the outcomes, from the recommendations of the dissertation.
Excellent point. And just to explain, when I meet with students, I often will mark things that they identify and say, oh, this is the point that I'm really interested in. And the highlighting and the crossouts is not saying the information isn't true or things that being crossed out aren't important. But when you're trying to narrow down the focus, seeing, oh, these are the parts that are leaping out that in the next draft you'll center.
Right.
And it's something that I recommend that students do when they're working on this themselves. Sometimes they'll have a spouse or friend do the note taking for them.
Yeah. But right. Prompt one is context and practice. Think about practice, think about context, and that's how those two come together.
So our second part, the prompt is asking, what do researchers currently know about the problem, and what is a recommendation for further exploration? Support your response with one current citation. And as you pointed out when we were first looking at this, we have 3 citations here. Do you have any thoughts to share about, for this particular assignment, whether it is better to give exactly what is asked for or to over deliver?
Right. Well, given where this assignment is in the program, you're writing this after your 3rd class in the program. So your exposure to supporting scholarly publications is going to be minimal at this point, unless it's something that you're carrying over from your master's investigation or something like that. So your immersion into the literature is going to be minimal, and that's why we put asking for just one citation. This is going to be where you're starting to look and identify what this gap is in the literature. It's like, and for this prompt, we're asking you to say, okay, what do researchers know about the topic, and what remains unknown? So that's this recommendation for future research. And it's between the two is where you'll find the gap in the literature. Because remember earlier I said it's going to make a contribution both to practice, which is the number one prompt, and to scholarship. And just because a student may think that, oh, this is a problem, we want them to go into the literature to confirm that yes, other people have researched this as well. And yes, this is truly a problem that is researchable, that's something that scholars want to know more about. Your dissertation is going to provide the voice of the scholars that have come before you, and give that scholarly conversation around what the research is saying, what researchers know, and then your contribution is going to be in your voice as well. What contribution is your dissertation going to make to that scholarly conversation in that? And so this is just a snapshot in a couple of sentences of what we know, what researchers know, and what they want to know.
Now, coming after students doing various assignments related to their research interest, they often have more to draw on than would fit in this space. And wondering if you could give some words of advice on how to winnow down to those most relevant things. I see here that we have in our first sentence, we have a older source here. Certainly this suggests that the problem has been going on for a while, but would you recommend including this particular source and perhaps this sentence in this section?
I don't think so. I don't think it's really relevant. I mean, yes, teacher shortages have been around for a long time, but looking at the second sentence, district has had, and I'm not sure if this, so this came from Angler 2022. So that affirms that it's been around for a while. And I think that it's pretty common knowledge that teacher retention, teacher attrition, whatever angle you want to take from it, has been around for a while. So that first sentence really doesn't give me any more information. There'll be opportunity. Now, I'm not saying completely do away with the source. Always keep, at this point in the program, it's always good to start getting organized with your sources and your references, and using getting familiar with Zotero or some other method of keeping up with all of your resources and everything. It's like never throw anything away, but because you never know when you might be able to need a resource, or at least go back to it to help you find other things. So it's very much a puzzle and a maze.
And I know many students in the program will keep a Word document or a spreadsheet where they just put all these sentences they cut because it's not needed for this thing. But perhaps when they are working on their literature review, this might come back as something that is relevant to that argument.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things we want current documentation. And in your annotated bibliographies, I think the threshold is like 5 to 7 years. And the reason that is there is because when you graduate, we ACU are saying that you are current in the literature.
Mhm.
And while it's good to show that lineage, that the problem, establish that the problem has been around for a while, you want to show like a 2003, a 2010, a 2015, 18, show that's how you can show, how you can demonstrate that it's been around for a long time. In that, through synthesis, it's like and I think that's one of the keys for this particular assignment, is you're going to be developing skills to synthesize and pull different ideas together from multiple sources to add a level of credibility and rigor, demonstrate rigor in your work.
What about this next sentence here? I see this sometimes in drafts where the student will include a sentence that seems to be saying, "Oh, yes, and so here's what to do about the problem."
Yeah, that's pretty common, isn't it? We students in the program are all high achievers, type A personality. I mean, they're here because they're subject matter experts, because they're wanting to get that next credential for their next career move. And so they're problem solvers. And it's like, I see a problem, I define it, I fix it, I move on. The dissertation process is a little different, or maybe it's a lot different, in that we ask you to back up and really define what the problem is so that you can systematically investigate it. And yes, students that are move immediately to solution are in good company, because that's a very common problem with that. But here, we're not trying to solve. We're just trying to say, okay, what still needs to be explored in this particular prompt.
Something I think is important to add on to that is that that source might be important for their making their argument about a recommendation for further exploration, because it's very rare to read a scholarly article or a dissertation that doesn't have some recommendations for future research. So Presley 2021 may very well be making a recommendation for further exploration. We're just not seeing it in the specific sentence that's being included here.
Right. This was probably a practice implication for practice instead of a recommendation for future research.
Shall we move on to consequences?
Sure.
All right, so the prompt is, what consequences might occur if this problem is not studied further? And we have, if this problem is not addressed, then students will receive an inadequate education and not be well prepared for the rigors of college. Now, I look at this and say, well, that very well may be true. I don't remember reading about college coming up before.
Right.
So, of course, in a dissertation, alignment is one of the hardest things to do, to make sure that everything is consistent and you're describing the same problem that you're solving. We're back at an earlier stage of planning here. So when you see something that is very far-reaching like this, do you have any suggestions for how to make it appropriate in scope?
Right. Alignment. It's, we always talk about alignment. Go back to the earlier prompts, if there's alignment, you'll want to make sure that you're consistently talking about the same thing in each of the areas. So I would expect, if you're talking about teacher retention, I would expect the consequences to be related to something to do with teacher retention there. It would be something like, teachers will continue to leave. If we don't talk about burnout, if we don't figure out burnout, then teachers are going to continue to leave.
Thank you. What about this next one? How does this problem connect to leaders or leadership? Leaders should provide training on burnout prevention to keep teachers from leaving the profession. I'm reminded of your note earlier about students wanting to solve the problem right away. And I think this is perhaps answering a different question than is being asked. Yeah. Would you agree?
I would agree. And it's more like, for this problem, it's like, what do leaders need to know in order to help solve the problem that you've consistently identified through the process? Sometimes it's, if you're talking about in K through 12, if you're studying principles, I mean, that's an easy connection to leadership, right? If you're talking about math teacher retention, then it's like, okay, so what do principals need to know? What do administrators need to know? Not just necessarily principals, but what do administrators need to know in order to support math teachers?
Thank you.
Sure.
Speaking of connections, that's the theme for this next question. How might this problem connect to your program concentration? And we have, burnout is a major problem affecting educational organizations. Therefore, leaders should provide training on burnout prevention to keep teachers from leaving the profession.
Okay. So burnout is one of the things that, because a student is in positive leadership, and positive leadership is directly connected to the burnout is one of the things that positive leadership is concerned with. So that would be a good connection there. And from an alignment perspective, I would have expected to have seen something in the citation question where they were talking about wanting to know the research, what researchers know and what they don't know. I would have expected to have seen something related to burnout in that prompt. Yeah. Right.
I do know that there are some students who will meet with their professors when revising this assignment and will use a Google document so that they can take these notes and check to make sure that they are correctly understanding and processing feedback, so that the next version will get more of these things on the revision. But realizing that we're all very busy people and that our average student is working full-time and may have family and other obligations besides, notes are very, very helpful for accountability, because you might leave to teach, family, drive through the traffic, or any other things that may make it harder to remember exactly what. But if you leave with well-written notes, then it's very easy to pick up.
Right. And we recognize also, at this point in the program that you will not have had any of your concentration courses at this point. But there is this opportunity because you do know what your concentration is. And in that 701 course, you're going to have the opportunity to dig into some of the, I think you do 5 annotated bibliographies in that course. So you can make one of those courses, one of those annotated bibs related to what your concentration is, and at least get an idea of what the concentration is about. Now, the last note, if you would pull share that back, and let's look at that last note at the bottom of the document.
Yes.
So, this is there so that students who get into the literature and say, okay, I need to pivot,
Mhm.
that you would still provide feedback on, or still include feedback that you were given on that exploration of research problem paper that you submitted in 701. You would
Mm.
still be able to incorporate that into the new proposed research problem. So you're taking what you learned and still applying it in this particular context.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's look at another example.
Okay.
So this one here, of course, it's a same template, same assignment. And for describing the problem in the context or setting, we have the problem addressed in this study is the national phenomenon of declining math scores on standardized exams. Teachers are using inefficient methods of teaching and not motivating students. Administrators should require teaching workshops to update pedagogy methods to better motivate students. It's a small thing, but one thing that immediately springs to my mind is that it would be helpful to know which country we're talking about, because we have students who are teaching all around the world. And the US educational system is very different from, say, our colleagues in the United Kingdom. We don't have A levels, which is a source of great confusion for people reading Harry Potter books and not knowing what those OWL levels are actually referring to. So before we go on, I'm just going to go ahead and, for the sake of our discussion here, add a geographic clarification. All right, so looking at this, the first sentence seems to be identifying a general problem. It's very broad. And then we have what I think is a follow-up detail. Teachers are using inefficient methods of teaching and not motivating students. And that is a very broad statement. I'm not sure, looking at it, how many teachers, what proportion, is this a little, a lot, all? And so that is one of the things that catches my eye. What are some things about this passage that catch your eye?
It's very broad and very general. And the last sentence even moves to solution instead of problem within context. So if it's what's the judge of inefficient methods? Is it could you be more specific with respect to they don't have, are lacking in something, lacking in some kind of a knowledge. So look at narrowing, and maybe is it K through 12? I mean, is it elementary? Is it high school, middle school? What's the population? And see how that narrows the context even more.
So if I were to add a little detail, because this sometimes comes up when I am talking with a student and they supply the information, and it became, in my local district, an internal report found that a quarter of teachers are using inefficient methods. So now it's become much more specific. Would you say that satisfies your concern?
That is much better. That great improvement. Yes.
And this last sentence here, being about a solution, and may I ask your opinion if it included this additional detail?
Right. Yes, that's even, yes, that pinpoints and shows that something, they tried to do something, but it wasn't done. So that definitely defines the problem more. Yes.
And this clarifies a little bit more that there's
Yes.
a practice gap. They had a
Yes.
report saying, oh, do this, and
Yes.
for whatever reason, it hasn't been done yet.
Yes.
Let's talk about the second section here. So again, the prompt is, what do researchers currently know about the problem, and what is a recommendation for further exploration? And we'll just note that it says support your response with one current citation, and here we've gotten 3 sentences, each with different citations. Recent citations, but 3 more than the one being requested. So we have this first sentence: students like flipped classrooms because they're more engaging and fun, followed by virtual reality teaching is very promising for engaging students who might otherwise be disruptive, and regularly pedagogy training workshops are for teachers are associated with improvements in the attendees' students' performances.
I'm not seeing any connections to the problems that were defined in the first prompt.
I absolutely agree. And this is something where we often run into one of those challenges when you know a lot about the subject and you're surrounded by other people who know the subject, possibly your coworkers at the institution where you're seeing this, where there may be gaps that you understand how to fill those in implicitly, but are not necessarily open and to the reader. That report very well could have said that one of the recommendations was to implement a flipped classroom, but we don't know that so far. Virtual reality teaching, not disagreeing that some studies have found that. I would be surprised if that was in the school budget. So that may be something that's true, but out of scope. So if we just narrowed our discussion briefly by setting those aside and looked at this last one, regular pedagogy training workshops for teachers are associated with improvements in the attendee students' performance. If we added a detail like this, and it became the district report specifically recommended monthly pedagogy trainings, which is important because regular pedagogy training workshops for teachers are associated with improvements in student performance.
Yes. Yes. Yes, because again, it's connected. We talked about pedagogy methods in the first prompt, and so a follow up here would be what researchers know and what they still need to know more about. It's good.
There's a challenge that comes with different scholarly systems and what they do or don't expect you to write. I do a lot of work with French literature, and academic French has, I think, ethos that says we would never insult the reader by spelling out everything, because of course you're well read and so you can make these connections. And this is not true in every field. And I think in APA style and education writing, it is extra helpful to spell out the connections explicitly so we know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And you are taking your reader, and this is starting now through the dissertation. You're taking your reader on a journey and want to lead them to the same conclusions you draw.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that by providing evidence of evidence based from others, that you find in the literature. And then you're going to be creating your own through your data collection
Mhm.
and analysis.
I'm glad you mentioned that last word because I was just thinking of it. In our workshops, our webinars at the Online Writing Center, we talk about the difference between analysis and synthesis in the formal sense, where analysis is where you're giving context and interpretation, and synthesis is where you're creating that new meaning. And that added part to start the sentence is, I would call analysis in the rhetorical sense, because it is giving that context for, oh, this thing happened, which is makes this other fact relevant. So thank you for mentioning that.
You bet.
Number 3, what consequences might occur if this isn't studied further? And we have students who do not perform well are more likely to be held back and not make progress to the next grade with their peers. I read that and I think I need to reread the first section and see, has that come up before?
Yeah. So the student in this particular instance, yes, student failure is an outcome, but the problem is the teacher. Is the problem is directly related to the teacher. And so you're looking at what are the consequences of not helping the teachers deliver better content.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's jump to number 4 here. All right, how does this problem connect to leaders or leadership? Leadership needs to support teachers and provide guidance.
Absolutely.
I certainly believe that that's important.
Mhm.
Would you say that if we made a small tweak, because this problem statement here and this detail about the report was specifically focused on pedagogy, would it strengthen this if we elaborated on guidance to put the focus on that pedagogy?
Sure, that's a great addition.
All right, and number 5, how might this problem connect to your program concentration? Every teacher has a responsibility to provide effective instruction for their students.
I'm not sure. I would be guessing as a reviewer of this, I would be guessing whether your concentration is principalship, superintendency. So provide something more about the link to what your concentration is. Okay, so as someone studying X, if you're in conflict resolution,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't have anything to do with, you haven't told me anything in the problem statement to this point about conflict. So that's why we're looking, I'll be looking for something that connects back to what you're studying. Oh wait, this student was positive leadership, wasn't it? So this would need to be something that would be again related to positive leadership in some fashion. So maybe it's it's from a positive leadership perspective. Maybe it's support from administration, positive support from administration or something like that. So yeah.
Any other things before we move on to our last example?
I'm good.
All right, so again, describe the problem in your context or setting. Many students have trouble with academic performance. Parents are not involved in their children's education and frequently do not attend parent-teacher conferences. Many students are not interested in applying to colleges. We have here 3 sentences that I think on a factual basis, you're not going to have much disagreement with. I'm looking at this and I'm not entirely sure what they want to focus on because these could be very different dissertations and possibly a lot more. If a student came to you with this as their draft. Are there any questions that you would ask them to help them narrow this down?
Well, the first thing I would do would be look at the concentration, and so that I could help direct the student into, because higher ed is involved, K through 12 is involved. Relationally, you could do the positive leadership. I can see the second sentence wanting to have or benefiting from, the relationship building that might go on with the parents and teachers. It's like, okay, so what's not working?
Okay.
What's specifically not working, and which of these three particular areas do you want to focus on?
Okay, for the sake of our discussion here, if this were in organizational leadership and we added a few clarifications from discussions with the students, student clarified, we're talking about middle school students, and we say, okay, well, all right, college, yes, that might cause problems down the line, but it's out of scope, and so they take that out. And now we're focused on the students and their parents. Both of these could be very different, because the addressing the students' performance and how to mobilize parents, very different things that you might do concurrently, but doing a dissertation on both sides would be long, I would guess.
Right. Academic performance may be the outcome that you want, but again, back up to finding the root cause of the problem. Is it parent involvement that administrators are struggling with? And it may be so this is one of those where it may be within the school setting, but definitely something that positive leadership would be able to come in and address. A principal or an administrator would be able to come in and implement some of the principles of positive leadership to build better relationships.
So we have here now a revised iteration of the idea, a little bit more focused. Parent involvement in their children's education is strongly associated with their children's academic performance, but in the local district, many middle school parents are not involved in their children's education and frequently do not attend parent-teacher conferences.
Yes, more succinct, more directed, yes.
Okay. Let's progress to number 2. What do researchers currently know about the problem, and what is a recommendation for further exploration? I know that this is a problem because I've been a teacher for many years and see students struggling frequently. Parents blame teachers for their children's poor performance, and administrators are not supportive. For the sake of our discussion, I'm going to presume that we've had a earlier discussion with the student, and they have clarified here that, yes, they are talking about the middle school context that was clarified above. Many of our students have a great deal of expertise and experience in education. I think the record that I've worked with a student who had more than 40 years as a teacher, and certainly you get a lot of expertise in that time period. But here, would you say that it is answering the question, what do researchers currently know?
Yeah, that would be a problem, because we're at looking for the literature, looking at the literature. And again, we've got all the students are subject matter experts and have that opportunity to see, have had opportunity to see and make that practitioner evaluation that, yes, this is a problem, but in this particular prompt, we're asking to confirm what they're seeing in practice with the literature.
And then we have parents blame teachers for their children's poor performance, and administrators are not supportive. Looking at the refinement for number 1, let's see, there seems to be a focus on the parental involvement. So I wonder if perhaps this sentence is more central to what they're interested in doing. Do you at times send students working on this assignment off to the library or off to our library staff?
Absolutely. Dr. Melissa Atkinson is a wonderful resource to help find literature. There's and that's one thing that I've been so impressed with this program is we have a wonderful writing center, and we have wonderful library resources as well. Then they can help with key terms, point in search literature, search directions, and that kind of thing. So it's definitely tap into those resources. And since you're so early in the program, start sooner than later in developing those good scholarly digging habits.
I think that is excellent advice. All right. Now, if we look at number 3, we have something that speaks to a larger problem in our society. I'm not sure this is under the scope of this particular dissertation. What consequences might occur if this problem is not studied further? Students who do not perform well are more likely to enter the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah, that would be a stretch. I would expect to see a consequence that was related to number 2, again, looking for that continuity and flow among your ideas, something that would logically flow out of a parent, lack of parent involvement.
Number 4, how does this problem connect to leaders or leadership? Leaders need to be more sensitive to teacher concerns and hold parents accountable.
Definitely. Again, this would be one of those things that would flow from the prompts above, but it's definitely in the right direction in that there's something that leaders would benefit from, need to know in order to help fix the problem, help address the problem.
Number 5, how might this problem connect to your program concentration? Poor student performance negatively impacts school performance and can cause a school to be graded as not performing adequately on the adequate yearly progress metric defined in the No Child Left Behind Act. This is problematic because schools that receive the choice or corrective action designation due to several years of low AYP scores may lose funding, have additional administrative burden or imposed, and or may be taken over or restructured.
Yeah, I'm not seeing how that's connected to positive leadership.
I think we jumped into another direction here.
Yeah, it could be a consequence, yes. This needs to be something that connects back to what the concentration is.
It may be that in this particular case, the district report was written because they were having some problems leading in this direction, but so far we haven't had any mention that these are the stakes that are being involved, or that this is something the student is focusing on. Certainly there are a lot of problems in our educational systems of the United States. Many of our students are engaged in working on trying to address them. This seems a little bit tangential to the focus of the problem so far.
Yes.
We have looked at several examples today, and I wondered if you might share a few words about the journey, because when a student submits one of their regular course assignments, they'll get some feedback on it, but usually you don't return to that so much as you do with the assignments that are pointing you towards the dissertation. Any advice for students when they get feedback on this assignment?
When feedback is given, first of all, submit it as soon as you can after 701. I think there may be even a part of the one of the last assignments is to show a screenshot that you've submitted it into your 777 course. In 701 to get some points on that. If you don't pass the first time, that's okay, because this is definitely an iterative process. And right now I am reviewing those, but whoever is reviewing these declaration of problems, they're going to give you feedback. And my suggestion would be to go ahead and attack that feedback sooner than later, because like I said, if you can have just a good declaration of problem established early on in this journey with us, with ACU, it will give you direction in pulling those annotated bibliographies and supporting, digging deeper into the literature to see whether this is something that has legs, something that you want to pursue and stick with and have a passion for, and so that you can move forward in writing that dissertation. Some students wait until because this is a requirement for you to move into 765, which is going to be probably 2/3 of the way through your coursework. So if you can get this nailed down sooner than later, then that will help direct your annotated bibliographies, because you're going to have 25 of those as a prerequisite before you go into 765 as well. And you think that, oh, I've got time because it's further down the line, I'm not going to worry about it, but time is going to go faster than you think. And the more that you can carve out time to work on those annotated bibliographies, remember that marathon that I told you you're running, that will serve you well in the long run. Because those 7 weeks are designed to help stimulate thinking, to give you skills that you're going to need to improve as a leader, to write your dissertation and everything. So there are things that are going to help feed that marathon as you go. But it's definitely something for this problem, declaration of problem. Attend to it sooner than later, and you will have a better set yourself up for success earlier than later, sooner than later. Then you're not scrambling to get everything done so you can get into 765.
I think that's excellent advice. And I'd like to say some of the things I've heard back to you to make sure that I've understood that well, and so that our students can hear it a second time as well. If I've understood correctly, you are suggesting that by working on this sooner rather than later, students will be able to shape how they write and research certain other assignments, like the annotated bibliography ones, to explore research that they're specifically interested in, is relevant to their dissertation, that they can then draw on for things like the literature review chapter that they will eventually write for their dissertation. Is that a fair summary?
It is. And be prepared for false starts. And it's okay that, you change direction, you get this down and you think, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to pursue. And then two terms in, it's like, I'm not feeling it. It's okay. Just back up and make that determination. Reach out to, someone to talk with, to brainstorm about. It's like, okay, I need to shift. How can I do this? Type thing. Dr. McMichael's there. Dr. Maxwell's there. I'm here. The Writing Center is great to talk with as well. But it may feel like you're alone, but we're here to help and support. And it's that, Dr. Considine, I think you said earlier, it's like if you can find somebody to talk to, the more you can hear it, the more it's going to solidify for you. So definitely reach out and talk to your cohort, talk to your family, hear yourself talk about it. You make a difference.
These are not written in a vacuum. Not that you couldn't try it, but it would probably be longer and a lot less fun than being able to work with other people and get the benefit of trying your ideas out before their final form is sent in text.
Absolutely.